Suddenly, every business apparently needs AI agents. They save time, cut costs, automate work, keep you competitive. That's the pitch. The problem is that a lot of people are throwing the term around before they've actually explained what it means. In this episode, we're looking at the AI agent hype and why it's creating more confusion than clarity for most smaller businesses.
AI agents are spreading the way most AI buzzwords spread. Fast. Product demos, course offers, LinkedIn posts, strategy decks, usually with the same promise underneath. Do more with less. Automate more. Reduce manual work. And for small businesses, that message hits differently because most smaller teams are already stretched, short on time, watching costs, trying to keep up with bigger players who seem to adopt something new every other week. So when a term gets framed as the next thing you can't afford to ignore, attention follows quickly. That part is predictable. The problem is what happens when urgency arrives before anyone's actually explained what the thing is. One of the biggest issues with AI agent is that it sounds more precise than it actually is. Different people use it to mean completely different things. Sometimes it's a chatbot that can take a few extra steps. Sometimes it's a multi-step automated workflow. Sometimes it gets described almost like a digital employee, something that reasons, decides, and handles work on its own. Those are not the same thing, but once one label covers all of them, the conversation falls apart pretty quickly. People think they're talking about one clear category. In reality, they're bundling together automation, task chaining, software logic, and a much bigger idea about machine autonomy. That's where most of the hype lies, not in what the technology actually does, but in how much gets projected onto the term. And when the definition stays vague, the promises get bigger. This matters most when the audience isn't a tech company or a research lab. It matters when it's a small business owner, a solo operator, or a lean team just trying to stay efficient, because those are exactly the people most likely to hear. You need this now. It'll save you money. It'll reduce staffing costs. It'll keep you competitive. That creates a very specific kind of pressure. Not technical pressure, market pressure. The feeling that there's already a new standard, and you're behind if you don't understand it immediately. But often, the people feeling that pressure haven't even been walked through the first basic question. What problem is this actually supposed to solve in my business? That part gets skipped. Instead of starting with a process, people start with a buzzword. And that usually leads to bad decisions. Because if the use case isn't clear, the automation won't be either. That doesn't mean it's all noise. There is real value here. But it tends to show up in smaller, narrower, less dramatic ways than the hype suggests. AI agent-style systems work well when a task is structured, repetitive, and bounded. Summarizing incoming information, sorting leads, preparing drafts, moving data through a repeatable internal process, handling simple steps before a human checks the result. That's genuinely useful. But it's also very different from the bigger fantasy floating around, that businesses are about to hand large parts of their operations over to vaguely defined autonomous systems. In practice, the value almost always comes from reducing friction in one specific part of a workflow, not from handing the whole thing over. That's a smaller promise, but it's also a more honest one. Here's what I think is actually happening. The AI agent hype tends to mix three things together: useful automation, impressive language, and much bigger assumptions about intelligence and independence. That combination makes the technology sound more mature than it usually is. And once that gap opens up, the market fills it with overstatement. Courses sell confidence. Tools sell possibility. Posts sell urgency. But smaller businesses don't need more urgency around AI. They need clearer thinking, They need to know which of their processes are structured enough to automate, where mistakes are acceptable, where human review still matters, and whether a system actually saves time once you factor in setup, monitoring, and the occasional fix. That's the serious question. Not whether your business has AI agents, but whether a specific part of your workflow can actually be improved without creating more complexity than it removes. Less exciting question, but it's the one that actually matters. The problem with the AI agent hype isn't that nothing useful is happening. It's that the language keeps running ahead of the reality. The term sounds clear. The promises sound big. The pressure feels immediate. But for most smaller businesses, the better question is still a pretty simple one. What exactly am I trying to make easier, faster, or less repetitive? That's where real value starts, not with the buzzword, with the workflow. Future systems.